Marcus Hale never imagined that the most important piece of land on his rural property would become the center of a neighborhood power struggle. As a retired flight paramedic, he had spent years working with local emergency services to keep a small, officially approved helipad available for rescue helicopters whenever accidents happened in the surrounding mountains. It stayed empty almost every day, but when someone needed it, every second mattered. Then a newly elected HOA board member, Karen Whitmore, decided the cleared landing zone looked wasted and transformed it into a community picnic lawn without permission. At first it sounded like another petty HOA dispute, but trust me, this was nothing like arguments over fences or mailbox colors. Bro, when I learned why that helipad existed, everything changed. What started as simple entitlement slowly turned into a life-or-death situation, and one emergency rescue call would expose every reckless decision Karen had made while delivering the kind of karma nobody saw coming. Marcus had purchased the property nearly 15 years earlier because it sat at the highest stable point in the valley, making it one of the few locations where emergency helicopters could safely land regardless of seasonal flooding. Long before the subdivision expanded around him, the county had worked with him to establish a designated emergency landing zone. It wasn't a commercial helipad, and helicopters weren't constantly flying in and out. In fact, weeks or even months could pass without a single landing. That quiet routine made it easy for newcomers to assume the wide circular clearing was nothing more than an oversized patch of perfectly maintained grass. Marcus didn't mind the questions because he had always believed that educating people prevented unnecessary conflict. Whenever a new family moved into the neighborhood, he politely explained that the landing zone was registered with local emergency responders and had to remain completely clear 24 hours a day. Most people reacted with appreciation once they understood its purpose. They usually said something along the lines of how comforting it was to know help could arrive so quickly if someone suffered a heart attack, a hiking accident, or a serious farming injury. Honestly, that made perfect sense because nobody expects to need an emergency helicopter until the worst day of their life suddenly arrives. Everything changed after Karen Whitmore moved into the neighborhood and immediately began treating the HOA like it was her personal kingdom. Within weeks of joining the board, she started creating committees for everything imaginable. There were discussions about approved flower colors, mailbox decorations, driveway stains, holiday lighting schedules, and even recommendations about what kinds of patio furniture looked appropriate for the community image. Bro, hearing about all of this genuinely made me laugh because we've all seen stories where a little authority completely changes someone's personality. Karen wasn't interested in improving the neighborhood. She wanted visible control. She enjoyed making rules because enforcing them gave her attention, and attention seemed to be exactly what she wanted more than anything else. Before long, she had convinced several neighbors that the grassy circle on Marcus's property represented wasted recreational space that could supposedly bring the community together. Marcus heard rumors before anything actually happened. People casually mentioned that Karen had floated ideas for seasonal festivals, family picnics, outdoor yoga classes, children's games, and weekend food truck events. Every single suggestion involved using the emergency landing zone because, according to Karen, it was already flat, beautifully maintained, and conveniently located. Marcus immediately contacted the HOA board with copies of the county documentation showing the site's emergency designation. He remained respectful, explained why absolutely nothing could be placed on the field, and assumed the paperwork would settle the misunderstanding. That's exactly how reasonable adults normally solve problems. Unfortunately, Karen wasn't interested in facts that stood in the way of her plans. Instead of accepting the explanation, she started telling neighbors that Marcus was exaggerating the importance of the field because he simply didn't want to share his property. She claimed helicopters almost never landed there anyway, so the restriction was outdated and unnecessary. The scary part is that enough people believed her simply because they had never personally witnessed an emergency landing. Over the following weeks, small changes began appearing around the edge of the clearing. Temporary decorative signs pointed visitors toward the community green. Portable picnic tables mysteriously showed up one Saturday morning. Folding chairs appeared the following weekend. Then came flower planters positioned close enough to create a welcoming entrance while technically staying just outside the landing circle. Marcus documented every single change with photographs and calmly notified both the HOA and county emergency coordinator each time. He wasn't trying to start a fight. He simply wanted a written record showing he had repeatedly warned everyone before something serious happened. Looking back, that decision turned out to be one of the smartest moves he ever made. Karen, meanwhile, interpreted Marcus's patience as weakness. She became increasingly confident that nobody would challenge her authority. For social media posts celebrating neighborhood gatherings started appearing almost every weekend, with smiling families spreading picnic blankets across the very area designed to remain completely unobstructed. Children chased soccer balls across the landing zone while decorative umbrellas cast shadows over the center circle. Food coolers, bicycles, folding tents, and portable grills slowly became normal sights. Every new gathering attracted more participants because people naturally assume that if dozens of families are doing something publicly, it must be allowed. That's exactly how bad decisions spread in real life. Nobody stops to ask whether the original decision made any sense. Marcus continued taking the high road. Rather than confronting families individually, he contacted emergency services again to verify that the landing zone remained listed as active. The answer was immediate and crystal clear. It absolutely did. Local dispatchers still relied on that location whenever serious incidents occurred within several miles because alternative landing sites either flooded after storms or contained dangerous power lines. Hearing that honestly gave me chills because it meant the situation wasn't theoretical anymore. This wasn't about property values or HOA politics. Real emergency plans still depended on that field exactly as it was originally designed. Even after receiving another formal notice explaining the safety requirements, Karen doubled down. She announced plans for the neighborhood's biggest summer picnic yet, complete with dozens of families, lawn games, decorations, and temporary shade tents positioned across nearly the entire clearing. Marcus watched the announcement spread through community groups with growing concern, knowing that every additional chair, table, and blanket increased the risk if an emergency helicopter suddenly needed to land without warning. He could already feel that something was building beneath the surface, because stories like this never stay small for long. And unfortunately for everyone involved, fate had perfect timing. The morning of the community picnic arrived with perfect weather, and Karen treated it like a personal victory. Cars lined the nearby streets, colorful tents covered large sections of the emergency landing zone, and families filled the field with picnic blankets, coolers, lawn games, and folding chairs. Looking at the photos later, it was almost impossible to believe that this had once been a designated rescue landing site. Marcus stayed remarkably calm. He documented everything with timestamps, notified the county emergency coordinator that the landing zone was obstructed, and made one final request for the area to be cleared. Karen ignored every warning, convinced that nothing would happen because helicopters had been so rare in recent years. That's exactly how entitlement works. People mistake good fortune for proof that the rules don't matter. Then, just after lunch, everything changed. A serious hiking accident occurred only a few miles away, and emergency responders immediately activated the very landing zone everyone had been treating like a park. Within minutes, the distant sound of rotor blades echoed across the valley. Bro, I genuinely couldn't believe the timing. The crowd that had spent all morning relaxing suddenly realized the helicopter wasn't passing overhead, it was coming directly toward them. In an instant, panic replaced celebration, and Karen's harmless little picnic became a dangerous obstacle that emergency crews now had to overcome before they could save someone's life. As the rescue helicopter descended toward the valley, the pilot immediately spotted the crowded landing zone and was forced to abort the first approach. Families scrambled in every direction, grabbing chairs, coolers, umbrellas, and blankets while rotor noise grew louder overhead. The delay lasted only a few minutes, but in an emergency, those minutes carry enormous weight. Ground responders rushed ahead to clear the field while dispatch recorded that the designated landing site had been obstructed. Marcus helped direct people away from the center circle, doing everything he could to restore the area as quickly as possible. Watching him protect the very space Karen had dismissed was honestly unbelievable. The helicopter landed safely on the second attempt, and the injured hiker was transferred for advanced medical care without further delay. Once the immediate emergency ended, the real consequences began. County officials documented the unauthorized use of the landing zone, reviewed Marcus's previous warnings, and compared them with photographs, emails, and official notices he had carefully preserved for months. Every piece of evidence pointed to the same conclusion: Karen had knowingly ignored repeated safety warnings. Instead of becoming the neighborhood hero she imagined, she became the example everyone talked about. The HOA quietly removed every community event from the site, the unauthorized decorations disappeared within days, and Karen's credibility collapsed almost overnight. The power she had chased for attention vanished because one real emergency exposed exactly why the rules had existed all along. In the weeks that followed, the landing zone was fully restored and marked with highly visible emergency signage that left no room for misunderstanding. The county also installed additional barriers and updated local emergency procedures to ensure the site could never be repurposed again. Marcus never celebrated Karen's downfall because, to him, the real victory was knowing the next rescue wouldn't face unnecessary delays. Honestly, that says a lot about his character. 7. While Karen faded into the background after losing the community's trust, Marcus earned something far more valuable: lasting respect from both his neighbors and the emergency crews who depended on that field when lives were on the line. Looking back, this story proves that some rules aren't about control, they exist because someone, somewhere, may one day depend on them to survive. Bro, that's the kind of karma you simply can't ignore. If you enjoyed this story, hit like, subscribe, and let me know in the comments, who do you think was most responsible for what happened?